Okay, everybody, hello. Right Spotters are back. It's Chris and Shane again. Today, we want to talk about a little more detailed about article structure. Specifically, we want to talk about introductions and why introductions they're really your first impression. The reader sees your article is somewhere on your blog or published online, and they click it, and the introduction is literally introducing your content to them. If you think movies, because I love some movies, like the opening scene of a film can set the stage for everything to come after. If you think about the opening scene in Jaws, it sets the tone for the entire film. You have the actress running down the beach, being chased by her drunk boyfriend. She goes out in the water. It's quiet. It's calm. And then the Jaws music kicks in. She does the whole flailing thing. She actually just passed away like a month ago. Susan Backlany. But that introduction sets the tone for the entire film. It's creepy. It's unexpectedly scary. You don't know what's going on. So that was your introduction to the film. Circling back, the introduction to your articles serves the same purpose. It'll set the tone for your piece. It'll introduce the readers to the topic you're going to cover. And it's really a lot to get through in a relatively short amount of time, because you only have so much space in the introduction before it becomes the article. Shane, so how do you approach your article introductions?
Well, I'm going to counter that Jaws reference with one of my favorite movie intros, only because I'm a man. So my favorite is Basic Instinct with Sharon Stone. So the first scene, have you seen Basic Instinct?
Of course, yep.
So if anybody who hasn't seen Basic Instinct, basically there's two couples going for it on a bed. The male was chained up, bang, bang. And then all of a sudden there's an ice pick and she stabs him to death. That's the start of the film. That is like the best start ever. Anyway, I think Jaws 1 is still good. So back on track with my thoughts on intro. So I've been a big fan of Dan John, reading a lot of Dan John's work. Dan likes to introduce an article by posing a problem, and then when you pose a problem, then you answer it in your article. So as an example of that, so you want to improve your squat. So your introduction to like wanting to improve your squats, like you could talk about the struggle of like when you're down in a hole and you can't rise and the barbell falls off your back. What do you do? And then you introduce that, and then you go into solving that problem in your article. So posing a question or a problem is a good way to start an article. Sometimes I like to start it in a witty way. Like if we were going to talk about exercises for the glutes, I can't resist some Sir Mix-a-Lot, and baby got back. So I might start off with something humorous like that. But I think you can't go wrong by posing a question and then answering and using that question to base around your introduction, and then answering that question in the body of your article.
I think that makes sense. I think a lot of that is you're letting the reader know, again, what your article is going to be about, what it's going to solve, the problem it's going to solve. And it lets them know, here's why I need to read this article. The trick to that is you have to capture their attention. So it has to be a relevant problem that suits them. You have to catch their interest with the way you're writing, that they're going to want to read 1,500 more words, however many more sentences after your first couple sentences. And it needs to be informational. Like you can only pack so much information in the introduction. That's not really the point of the intro. We were just talking about, because you only have so much space to work with. Good introduction is basically short and to the point. It's maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe 4, if you can get away with it. I did a back squat article for Brick and Muscle, and my entire introduction was that old weightlifter poem from Iron Man magazine in like the 80s with, it's like 3 or 4 stanzas with, the young kid's going to the gym and he can't get any size, and turns out he's been doing leg extensions. And moral of the story is, boy, the problem with you is you ain't been squatting. So
I don't know that one. That's right.
it's a good little poem for me. But it's that poem's been around for 40 something years, and it's relatively known in the community. So you're writing about squats. That's your first intro. It's a poem about squats. But generally, you want it very short, very to the point, couple of paragraphs. Does that make sense? Do you use any kind of like framework for how to stay focused and on point?
Well, I think obviously because you mentioned before that being brevity is the name of the game with the intro. Besides posing that question or starting with a story like that squat pun, I think any good introduction when it comes to fitness articles is you let the reader know what's coming next, right? And then when the reader knows what's coming next, if the article is not going to be of any use for them, and then they could stop at the intro. But if the article is going to be useful for them, then the intro, they'll read the rest of the article. So I think posing the question or telling the story like the squat article, like you said, and then at least probably I'd say the last paragraph in any fitness article introduction should be letting the reader know what comes next.
I think definitely. I think you want to introduce certainly the topics you're going to cover, and maybe the way you're going to explain it. Like if you're going to summarize, you're going to explain how to do the squat and how to program the squat and benefits of the squat or whatever. I would though try to keep the writing interesting. I would try to avoid saying, in this article, I will teach you how to da 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 da. Like not so clinical. You still want it conversational. You still want it to be good writing and easy reading, but not so much in this you'll do this, because that gets kind of dry, kind of bland. It kind of like fizzles out. If you have a good start to the intro and then you kind of fizzle out at the end, you kind of leave the reader in kind of no man's land with, do I want to keep reading? Is it worth it? Is it going to be, am I going to get through the rest of the article, or is it going to taper off my interest? Yeah. So even in the introduction, you need to write well and write entertainingly, if that's your thing, and just avoid being kind of cut and dry, because don't take it for granted just because it's an intro, just because it's only 2 or 3 paragraphs. Like, write well.
So when I explain, this is just how I do it. It's not how you should do it. This is just how I do it. I usually use the word "we'll," like we, because it's you and the reader. So I often, when I explain in the intro what's coming next, I say, here we'll dive into the benefits of the squat, how to do the squat, common mistakes with the squat, and then we'll wrap up on how to program it in your, how to program it in your workout. So I use the word we because it's you and the reader. I know it's just a small thing. Kind of, if you include the reader in your article and make them feel part of it, then they're probably more likely to read it. It's just a little thing.
I think that's huge, and that ties into what we were talking about recently with word choice and phrasing. I love talking about like we, because it's team building. It's not talking down to somebody and saying, you're going to do this and you're going to do the squat this way, or I'm going to tell you whatever. It changes from a more authoritarian point of view to a communal point of view. And that's
yeah, it's just a little thing. It's just a little thing. I mean, that I do. Doesn't mean those who are listening should do it. But I think when you're in any introduction in any article, if you can somehow include your reader into the article, they're more likely to read it, right? Rather than you being up here, you're down on their level.
Exactly, and it's pulling them in, it's drawing them in, it's putting them on your level, like you said, and it's getting them invested in the information. So they're kind of buying in, and they're incentivized to keep reading because it's a journey, and we're on this together. We're doing this at the same time.
There's no need to go overboard, but
right.
I think I've read a lot of articles, obviously, but I think one of the most annoying parts of guys who are really, really smart, who write and they try and convey the information, is they convey it on the mountaintop and they show how smart they are and they use fancy language, and that just loses me completely. I think if you want to capture your reader's attention and you don't want to lose their attention, make them a part of the article.
I think that's a great trick, and that's a great thing to keep in mind. Just generally, just as a trainer, you're in it with the person, you're in it with the client at the same time. You're working together to achieve goals. So that just makes sense.
Trust me, it took me a long time to get there. Right. And then, and it's just, again, it's just a matter of practice, right? Just a matter of practice. But it's worth it.
No, definitely. That's, practice is always going to help. I think another thing too with formulating a good introduction, you really need to kind of know what you're writing about and also how you're going to say it, because again, it sets the tone for the piece. If you as a writer are very funny, if you just have humor throughout your article, you don't have to hold that back. You're not like saving the punchline till the end. If you can do a funny introduction, that's introducing your writing to the reader right off the bat, so they know what they're in for. If you're research-based and very scientific and clinical, include that in your introduction. If you want to fit a citation in the first 2 paragraphs, go for it. It'll let readers know what they're in for, that this is a science-based, well-researched piece of writing. So buckle up and get learning. So your tone should be from word 1. Your voice should show through from the first sentence. And I think that's kind of something that I've seen sometimes, is that, again, writers and coaches kind of use the introduction, they kind of take it for granted almost. It's like it's just something to get through because it's so short, it doesn't really matter. The meat of the article is afterwards. But if somebody reads your introduction and is not interested in reading the meat of your article, then you lose.
I honestly think, now that you bring that up, the headline and the introduction are probably the most difficult parts to write. I think once you get the headline and the intro, the rest is easy to me, right? But I think nailing your headline and intro is that important for good fitness writing, because it is the hardest thing to write, because like we've said before, everything's been written before, right? Everything's been done before. So how are you going to differentiate? I'm going to get that word out. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee. How are you going to differentiate you from all those other articles? It's your intro.
It is. And again, it comes back to that. That's your first impression you're making on people. I read somewhere, and I wish I could remember where, that the goal of a headline is to get somebody to read the first sentence, and the goal of your first sentence is to get somebody to read your first paragraph. The goal of the first paragraph is to get somebody to read whatever. And I heard that, and I do not remember where I saw it, and that irks me, but it makes sense, because
that's gold, Chris. That is absolute. That's gold. Yeah, that's spot on. That's true.
It is, because you think about it, somebody's going to see the headline of your article before anything else, because that's what's going to be on social. It's going to be on your blog main page. It's going to be on the website that published it. It's title, here's how to work out by Joe Smith. And somebody's going to decide to click that, or they're not. When they click it, it opens up. They're going to read how to work out by Joe Smith, words. They're going to read those words, and they're going to decide whether or not to keep reading. So it's a step-by-step formula. And you can't take it for granted. It needs as much attention and effort and skill to build a good introduction as it does to write the rest of your information. Maybe that means you save it till the end. Like, write the meat of your article, know that you're going to have to do 3 paragraphs to introduce and 1 or 2 to conclude, but that's a whole other thing. So maybe write your article, get all the talking points and all the educational content out, and then go back, now that it's all fleshed out, consider this is what I wrote about. What do I think is the best way to go from 0 to 60 and introduce people to this topic?
Never done it that way before. I've never done it that way, but I think that's legit for sure. But no, I always start off the headline and the intro. But I think for people who want to write good introductions, that's a good way to start. Don't worry about the introduction. Don't think about it. Just write the meat of the article, and then go back and read the article and think, well, how am I going to introduce this? I think that's a good way to do it.
It could be. It's worth trying. If that's a stumbling block, if it's really tripping you up and you can't figure out what you want to say, then just know you have to say it, get through the rest, and then come back to it. I've done that a couple times. Or I might do like a sentence or something with like, filler goes here, and then get to the stuff and circle back.
No, I really like that idea.
It's something, but it just comes back to treating the introduction as a key piece of your article, of your content. Because without the introduction, like, how many people do we know train heavy with no warm-ups? We know people that do. It's a terrible idea. It's like nothing good's going to happen. You'll perform better if you do a good warm-up. Your article will be better and better, more well-received with a good introduction. Same idea.
I mean, what you just described that. I mean, when I worked at a commercial gym, that used to happen all the time. Guys coming in off the street, whacking plates on as part of their warm-up. I've actually used that as part of my introductions. Just, I think taking your experiences like that, if you're going to say introduce an article on warm-up, go to a story that you've seen before. We've talked about how we don't really have to reinvent the wheel when we write. Use those experiences in your introduction.
That's putting your information from the first step. That's not saving your stories to tell until the meat of the article. It's the introduction is something you're writing. So get writing, use your voice, use your experiences, use your unique perspectives to make an interesting, readable, and informative introduction.
You know how I like to veer off track. So I wrote this article for Muscle and Fitness a while back on why ice hockey players need to do chin-ups. And we all know that story of the number 1 draft pick of somebody who could not do one chin-up. And he got lambasted in the press. Remember, I think it was even on the national news. So that's what I used in my intro. I just used a story that everybody knew, right? Do you remember when so-and-so couldn't do a chin-up? And that like gets people attention straight away because they know it. They're familiar with it.
Right. That's a great relevant topic. That's a great way to grab attention. And it pulls it into the real world. Yeah. Like you take from the real world. It's a real world experience that people are familiar with, so it'll catch their eye. I would probably say that, like, I don't follow hockey, but I've heard of similar situations with pro athletes being flat out weak in the gym, and it made headlines. So if I see something like that, I'm familiar with the idea, so I have reason to keep reading. Like, yeah, I've seen that happen. I've read about that happening. So how could I not do that? I think that makes sense.
Yeah. There's lots of ways we can go about writing an intro, like we've both described. But I think it all comes down to capturing the reader's attention from the get-go, like Jaws,
or like an ice pick to the who knows where.
That's the best movie. The best movie intro ever.
Yeah. Saving Private Ryan, I guess.
Yes.
See, did we cover more in depth? I think we said that we want a good intro to be short and to the point. Did we? I think we went over paragraph wise, word count wise. What do you usually stick to? Did we review that? Did we mention that?
Well, no, not really. But this is, I mean, there's many ways you can do it. So I'm just going to say how I do it, and then I think you should go into your experiences at 10 Nation and Breaking Muscle. But I like, me personally, for most articles that I write, I like to keep the intro around 200 words. You mentioned before that that's about 3 paragraphs. I think anything less than 100 words is too short, and anything longer than 200 words is probably going to be too long. So I think 150 to 200 words is a real sweet spot, right? And you, in that 150, 200 words, you capture your reader's attention, and then you introduce what's to follow.
I think I like that approach. I think I've generally seen like 2 or 3 paragraphs as a rule of thumb. Like 1 paragraph, you really can't do any significant introducing.
It's too short.
It's way too short. Yes, you're not gonna get attention and explain your article and be interesting all in 3 sentences. Like there's no point. 2 or 3 paragraphs, I would say, is a rule of thumb, which probably falls into about the same word count you're saying. Excessively long introductions can also be a turnoff. It can become boring. It can become, okay, good, give me the article now. So really anything over like 4 paragraphs, you really need to avoid. Like there's almost no reason for an intro to be above 4 paragraphs. At that point, you're not introducing, you're just either rambling or you've started explaining the article without a smooth transition. So I kind of like 1 or 2 paragraphs, attention grabbing, and then the last paragraph of the introduction particularly, I like to use as a more direct introduction to, and so now we're going to go over why the Turkish getup is underappreciated and who should do more Turkish getups. And so that'll be the conclusion of the introduction or the segue to the actual article. It's kind of how I approach it. The last paragraph of the intro moves into the real article, the main point of the article.
I think what you're trying to say is don't write the article in your introduction, right?
100%. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, don't write your article in your introduction. Just write your introduction, then get into the article.
Oh, this chat is filled with gold nuggets everywhere. I think we're good. I think we covered a lot of ground. We don't want to go overboard in the intro. Again, I think it comes back to stay focused, grab attention, explain what you want to explain, get to the point. Don't overdo it. Don't oversell. Keep it tight, keep it focused, keep it informative, and take it as part of your article. It's not fluff. It's not filler. The intro serves a valid, important purpose.
And if you want help with article introductions, why don't you send yours to the Right Spotters at therightspotters@gmail.com, and we'll give you a free opinion on your intros so you too can write like Chris and Shane.
I love it. That's what we do. Send them in. Send in your questions. Send in your content. We'll review it. Free feedback. rightspotters@gmail.com, at the Right Spotters on socials. And we will catch you guys next time. Take care.
Perfect.